In this video, we explore horror stories of babysitters. In the darkness of the night, it's not always easy to know who or what is in the shadows, watching while you care for the little ones.
The boy from the well.
When they told me about their imaginary friend, I never thought I would start seeing him too, as real as the children themselves. It was my first job as a babysitter. I had to take care of 2 children from a family that had just moved to the outskirts of the city. The house was huge, old, with high ceilings and dark wooden furniture. From the moment I entered the house, something felt off, but I tried to ignore it. The kids, Mike and Sophie, were 6 and 4 years old, and they were quiet from the very beginning. But I didn't mind. What did bother me was when they started talking about their imaginary friend. It all began one afternoon when I saw them whispering in the corner of the playroom. It seemed like a normal conversation between siblings, until Mike pointed to the darkest corner of the room and said, "He doesn't want you to come closer." I didn't think much of it at the time. Kids often invent imaginary friends. But there was something in the way he said it that made me uneasy, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. By the end of the day, I couldn't help but ask more about this friend. Mike and Sophie looked at each other as if they had been waiting for me to ask, and then told me their friend's name was Charlie. He had lived in the house a long, long time ago, and only they could see him. That made my blood run cold. Over the next few days, things got stranger. I heard noises in the house while the kids were asleep. Soft footsteps, as if someone was running down the halls. Sometimes at night, while I read bedtime stories, I felt a presence behind me, like someone was watching from the shadows. One afternoon, while I was making dinner, I heard the children's laughter coming from the dining room. I went to check, but only saw Mike sitting in the middle of the living room with his back to me. When I called him, he turned around. But it wasn't Mike. It was another boy, wearing old-fashioned clothes with short, dark hair. As I stared, he stood up, and I could see his clothes were dirty. His gaze was cold, and he looked like he was angry at me. Before I could react, the boy disappeared. That same night, Sophie told me something I'll never forget. While I tucked her in, she looked at me with her big, dark eyes and said, "Charlie says this was his house. He doesn't like that you're here." My hands shook. I asked Sophie what Charlie looked like, and she said, "He's always dirty because he fell into the dry well. His hair is short and dark, and sometimes he looks angry." She said it as if it were completely normal. I stood there frozen. It was the same boy I had seen in the living room that afternoon. After that, I started noticing more things. Toys would move when I wasn't looking. The clock in the living room always stopped at 10:30, the same time that, according to the kids, Charlie went to sleep. Sometimes while the kids played, I saw a shadow that didn't belong. It wasn't mine, nor was it the children's. It was smaller, the silhouette of a boy. The climax came on a stormy night. The kids were already in bed, and I was in the kitchen cleaning dishes. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Not soft and quick like before, but heavy and slow, climbing the stairs. I rushed to the kids' rooms thinking they had gotten up, but when I arrived, Mike and Sophie were sound asleep. And then I saw him again, standing in the middle of the children's room. I could see him more clearly this time. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were filled with rage, like I had done something terrible to him. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, staring at him, but suddenly, he spoke. "I don't like that you're here." His voice was like a whisper that echoed, as if it came from deep within the well he had fallen into. I could barely move. When I finally regained control of my body, I turned and ran. I flew down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, feeling a presence right behind me, as if Charlie was chasing me. I flung open the front door and ran out of the house without looking back. I haven't returned to that house since, but something inside me still feels like Charlie hasn't left. Every time I'm alone, especially at night, I can sense his presence, as if he's still behind me, watching with those furious eyes.
Silent watcher.
I didn't expect to find anyone else in the house, but there she was, staring at me from the hallway. I was 17 when I was called to babysit Luke, a 5-year-old boy. His parents were going out for the night and assured me it would be an easy job. I arrived just before sunset, everything clear. I only had to feed him dinner, put him to bed, and wait for them to return. I had no idea the worst part of the night would come after he fell asleep. Everything seemed normal at first. Luke was a shy kid, he didn't talk much and was very obedient. I had no trouble getting him to bed after a quick dinner and a couple of games. After reading him a story, I tucked him in. Luke asked me to leave his bedroom door slightly ajar, and I did. Before leaving, I thought I saw a shadow move by the window, but when I looked again, there was nothing outside. I went to the living room to watch TV, hoping the hours would pass quickly. The house was quiet, except for the soft sound of the television. Then, I heard soft footsteps upstairs, like someone was slowly walking down the hallway. At first, I thought it was Luke, that maybe he had gotten out of bed, so I went upstairs to check on him. But when I reached the top of the stairs, I saw a woman standing in the hallway, right by Luke's bedroom door. She had her back to me, wearing a dirty gray dress that looked old, and her long tangled hair fell down to her waist. I froze, wondering what she was doing there. Even though she had her back turned, it felt like she was watching me, like her eyes could see me without even turning around. Then, she just vanished, as if reality had swallowed her whole. The hallway was empty, and a heavy silence fell over the house. My heart racing, I stepped into Luke's room and found him sound asleep, wrapped in his blankets, completely unaware of what had just happened outside. I went back downstairs and turned the TV on again, trying to distract myself, but the minutes dragged on slowly. Every creak of the house, every shadow moving by the windows made me jump. Then, I heard it again. Slow, dragging footsteps upstairs, this time louder, more distinct. I turned off the TV and rushed back up the stairs, but as soon as I reached the hallway, I felt a coldness in the air. When I opened Luke's bedroom door, I immediately knew something was wrong. The bed was empty. He was gone. My hands trembled as I looked around, thinking maybe he had hidden in the closet or under the bed. Then I heard a faint whisper, coming from the darkest corner of the room. A chilling cold spread through the air. I turned toward the darkest corner of the room, and there she was again. The woman, hunched over and silent. Her face was pale. She was incredibly thin, and her hair hung in loose strands over her face, as if she had just emerged from somewhere deep and dark. But the worst were her eyes. Black, empty, and with a twisted smile, she stared at me like she knew there was no escape. I was paralyzed, wanting to scream but unable to. And then, she spoke, her voice crawling across the walls of the room. "He's with me." I backed up until I hit the door, trying to reach the doorknob without taking my eyes off her. The cold was so intense I could see my own breath in the darkness. I felt pressure on my chest, as if the air in the room was getting heavier with every passing second. I still couldn't see Luke anywhere. Suddenly, I felt a small hand grab mine. I looked down, and there was Luke, standing beside me, trembling. I pulled him close and we ran out of the room, down the hallway, and straight to the stairs. We flew down the stairs, not daring to look back. I knew she was following us. I could feel it. We ran out onto the porch and sat down at the entrance of the house, but the cold air and the feeling of her presence lingered. I don't know how long it was before Luke's parents returned. When they did, I could barely explain anything coherent. I left without looking back, certain that thing was still in the house. I never went back to that house. But sometimes, late at night, I hear a whisper in the dark, and something tells me that woman is somewhere nearby, waiting, watching.
The black eyes.
The lights flickered, and when I opened the door to her room, I saw those black eyes watching me from the darkness. Not long ago, I was offered a weekend job to babysit a little girl named Emily. It was the first time I'd be staying with her since they moved into that old mansion on the outskirts of the city. I thought it would be an easy job. Play with her, feed her, and put her to bed at the same time every night. The house had something unsettling about it from the moment I arrived. There was something in the way the wind seeped through the windows, creating strange sounds in the walls. Emily was a quiet child. Far too quiet. It didn't take long to put her to sleep, and I settled into one of the guest rooms, determined to read until I dozed off. Around midnight, the noises started. They weren't the creaks of an old house, but something heavier, almost tangible. I heard footsteps shuffling just outside my bedroom door. I thought maybe Emily had woken up and was wandering around the house. I stepped out to check, but there was no one in the hallway. Her bedroom door was closed, and everything seemed in order. When I went back to bed, I heard a whisper, soft at first, almost like a murmur. I initially attributed it to the wind, but then I heard it again, clearer. A deep voice, as if someone were speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I froze in bed. The sound was coming from downstairs. I got up and went down the stairs, thinking someone might have broken into the house. When I reached the living room, a shadow caught my attention. At the far end of the room, in a corner barely lit by the soft glow of a lamp, I saw it, a tall, extremely thin figure with pale, grayish skin. It stood nearly 2 meters tall, and its arms were far too long, with its hands nearly touching the floor. Its face was hidden in the shadows, but I could make out its deep, black eyes, 2 dark voids that seemed to swallow the light around them. It didn't move. It just stared at me from that corner, as if it had been waiting for me all along. Its presence alone paralyzed me, and a cold sensation washed over the room. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, but fear took over, and I ran back to my room, locking myself inside. That night, I didn't sleep, terrified that the figure would return at any moment. The second night was even worse. After putting Emily to bed, I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion overcame me. I woke up around 2 in the morning, with that unbearable feeling of being watched. I looked around my room, but it wasn't there. Then I heard the whisper again, this time coming from Emily's room. I rushed to her room and found her still asleep, but we weren't alone. At the foot of the bed stood the tall, skeletal figure again. This time I could see its mouth, a thin, twisted line that seemed to stretch unnaturally far with no lips, just a dark, gaping hole. It reached out its arm toward the child, and I noticed its fingers ended in sharp, claw-like nails. The figure made a raspy sound, as if it struggled to breathe, each inhale like a groan of agony. I was petrified, but somehow I found the strength to scream. The creature slowly turned around, its head twisting toward me in an unnatural way, as if its neck had no bones. Its black eyes locked onto me, and its mouth slowly opened, revealing a row of long, sharp teeth. The creature began to crawl toward me. I couldn't move as its inhuman feet dragged across the floor, advancing as though it savored every second of my fear. Then I heard Emily's voice, soft but clear, saying, "She just wants to play." That phrase snapped me out of it. I grabbed Emily's hand without thinking, and we ran toward the door, not daring to look back. I raced down the hallway with Emily, the feeling that the creature was right behind us growing stronger with every step. We made it to the garden, but even though we were outside, I could still feel that thing watching us, lurking in the shadows of the house. Her parents returned the next day. I told them what had happened, but they didn't believe me. I never went back to the mansion, but since that night, whenever I'm in the dark, I can't shake the feeling of those black eyes, always watching me from some hidden corner. Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.